So UFC 322, Della Maddalena versus Makhachev is this weekend. Potential fight of the year or fight card of the year underway, guys. This the big one. We've been waiting for this. Right now, a lot of glories on the line. We could potentially have Makhachev becoming a two-division champion. We could potentially have JDM avenging Volkanovski. We have a lot of glory on the line for the women's division as well with Zhang Weili, and as well as the Valentina Shevchenko. Really, really great card. I think this is the best card we've had since UFC 300, bar none. Really looking forward to it. This weekend is going to be fireworks. But I'll start off with my early fight predictions and we'll get into it, have a little fun. Let's see what potential could happen, giving you my perspective. I'll start off with the early prelim opener of Velashev Borshev versus Matthias Camilo. Don't kill me if I mess up anybody's name too much. But I think Borshev got this one. I think Borshev is the more experienced fighter. I think he's overall just a more well-rounded fighter as well. I don't think Borshev has the greatest striking. I don't think Borshev has the greatest grappling. However, I think that he's able to fluently mix in both as appropriate. And I also think that he has a pretty decent toughness. I do think that Matheus Camilo is a very dangerous fighter for him, and there'll be a lot of constant pressure. However, I think that Borshev's well-roundedness and his ability to adapt in specific situations in this specific pairing, I think that he's simply just overall the better fighter with all of those attributes to be considered. I think that he ends up winning with a decision victory. I see it going 29-28. In this matchup, I don't really see Camilo outside of potentially a knockout. I don't really see Camilo being too much of a threat to Borshev in this specific pairing. Moving on, we have Bisinger Sarsakayev versus Eric Makhachev. I think that Sarsakayev wins this one. I'm also not just saying that because he's obviously an undefeated fighter. We have a lot of undefeated prospects coming up in the UFC right now. And I also know that Makhachev is the much more experienced fighter as far as diversity is concerned. But I don't think Sarsakayev is just overall better. I think that he's the more dangerous fighter. I think he's technically better. I think he has better striking as far as effectiveness. I think he has better fight IQ. Overall, I truly do believe he's just, honestly, I just think Makhachev is not on his level. I don't see Makhachev having much capabilities of kind of getting this one done. I think his striking is pretty good. And I know Makhachev is a good fighter, a good solid fighter. But against Sarsakayev, I don't really see him having much capabilities of kind of forcing a victory or overwhelming him. Do believe that he's a bit of a step behind quality fighter-wise. And I just see him kind of getting done in this. I do see it going as a finish. I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes a decision, but I do see Sarsakayev basically pulling a finish out in third round finish, whether it be by submission or KO. I wouldn't be surprised at either, but I just see it being a third round finish for Sarsakayev. Moving on, we have the women's strawweight division. We have Angela Hill versus Fatima Klein. We can see a plethora of experience on Angela Hill's part. And we see that Fatima Klein is kind of coming up. And I know that Angela Hill is the one coming in a loss. I'm going to kind of just stick with the obvious with this one and go with Fatima Klein. I know Angela Hill, obviously very experienced fighter, obviously very capable of winning, but kind of similar to what I was saying earlier, I just think that Fatima Klein is just a little bit ahead of what Angela Hill is capable of. I know that she's still kind of trying to build some momentum, and I know that a lot of people are going to count Angela Hill out. I'm not necessarily counting her out. I just don't necessarily think that she has a good enough skill set to overwhelm or that would really make me favor her in this matchup. I think that her striking is okay. I think her grappling is okay in this specific matchup, but I think that Fatima Klein is just more capable of getting it done. I expect Klein to be a bit careful with this one. I expect Angela Hill to be more aggressive, actually. I think Klein's going to try to be a bit more careful, kind of try to pick her apart here and there, going to try to pull the victory where she can. In my opinion, I think Klein gets it done by decision. I don't see either fighter necessarily getting a finish. That would actually surprise me a bit, but it would require a lot of pace pushing that I just don't see happening with this fight. I think it's going to be a bit of a slow grind that just ends in a decision on Fatima Klein. Moving on, we have Pat Sabatini versus Chepe Mariscal. I think Sabatini gets this one done. They've both fighters have been looking great in their past few fights. They've been looking good. They've been putting together solid performances, but I think Sabatini is just the more capable fighter. Better prepared, better striking. I think that he's just the one that's a better match against Mariscal. Mariscal is good and strong as well, but I just think Sabatini is just the better one in this one. I think Sabatini is kind of slightly ahead everywhere, and I do mean slightly. I think that he's slightly better striker, slightly better grappler, like slightly more fight IQ. Nothing crazy. I just think that he's ahead here and there. I actually see this one going as either a decision for Sabatini or a split decision for Sabatini. Right? Like I think that's the more realistic outcome. Wouldn't be surprised if because of how similar skilled they are, it becomes a real bloody war. I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes a real bloody war because of how similar their skill set is quality wise. But I think Sabatini gets this one done by split decision or just regular majority decision victory. Moving on to the final fight of the early prelims, we got Kyle Dawkins versus Gerald Meerschaert. I'm going with Kyle Dawkins. I think Meerschaert was a good fighter in his prime. I think Meerschaert got a lot done. I think Meerschaert has fought the who's who. I think Meerschaert was always game. Like Meerschaert was honestly one of those fighters that you ain't expecting him to become a champion, but you still tuned in to see him. But I think that Meerschaert is one of those fighters who's kind of approaching the end of his career. Like you never know, this might even become his retirement fight. As you see the win-loss column, like he's had a lot of fights. He's really been in there for some time now. But there's newer fighters coming up. There's better fighters coming up. There's the game is changing. They're doing things they weren't. Like there's moves, techniques, and adaptabilities that people are coming with that Meerschaert just isn't adapting and improving at the same rate. I think Kyle Dawkins kind of just finishes him. I'd say about second round finish. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he finished him by KO, TKO, or submission. I just don't think that Meerschaert is the fighter he once was. And I think that Meerschaert is just a little bit too slow. I think that his grappling isn't good enough to like force this at this stage in the game. We've all been surprised by the old guard before. Like we've seen people kind of had you must have done forgot performances all the time. I just don't see that being the case for Gerald Meerschaert in this specific instance. Kyle Dawkins by finish in the second round. Moving on. Speaking of finishes, we have Malcolm Wellmaker versus Cody Haddon. Monster matchup. We have, speaking of undefeated prospects, we have Malcolm Wellmaker, who has really been on that tier. Malcolm Wellmaker actually reminds me of Joshua Van a lot, both in fight style as well as like brutality. And saying that to say, I think Malcolm Wellmaker gets this done in the first or second round by a brutal finish. I think Malcolm Wellmaker has the heavier hands, the faster movements, just the hard and the flexibility, like just hard to get a hold of. I think Cody Haddon just doesn't have the skill set at this stage to actually pin Malcolm Wellmaker down. I don't think he has the durability to just take those heavy shots and to fully keep up with his striking or the striking pedigree or capability to just outstrike him to the point that you kind of pacify him. I don't see that happening in this matchup. I see Wellmaker kind of just forcing himself forward and just kind of brute forcing, diving through Cody Haddon. I don't see it being a long fight. I don't see it going to the full length either. I see this as a first or second round KO or TKO in favor of Malcolm Wellmaker. Moving on, we have number 4 ranked Erin Blanchfield versus number 8 ranked Tracy Cortez. It's been a little while since I've seen Cortez. Either that or I just haven't been keeping up. Either way, I got Erin Blanchfield. I think Erin Blanchfield, at least in recent time, has been a bit more active than Cortez. I think Blanchfield just is the better stylistically as well. I think Blanchfield's wrestling is better than Cortez's. I think her top control and pressure is better. I think her forward motion and momentum is better. I think her durability is better. I also think that she just has a better fighter mindset. I think Blanchfield cares more about fighting and MMA right now. And I think that Tracy Cortez is kind of transitioning to that stage in her career where MMA and fighting might kind of be a backdrop. Don't really feel like she's trying to be the champion. I think she's kind of in that stage where she's trying to be a celebrity. Now, that could just be my interpretation, and my interpretation could be wrong. But while Cortez has been having these wins, and as you see, they have very similar records with 13-2 versus 12-2. But I just see Blanchfield as being the better fighter in this one. I think Blanchfield kind of just smothers her and wet blankets her. I still think that Cortez is decent. I think Cortez is a good fighter for the flyweight division, the women's flyweight division. I don't see her beating Blanchfield, however. I think that Blanchfield 29-28. I wouldn't be surprised if Blanchfield 30-27, sir, to be honest. I'm expecting Blanchfield to more or less pitch a shutout in this fight. Don't see a finish, but I do see a shutout incoming. Moving on, we have the legend of Pennsylvania, the great wrestler Bo Nickel versus Rodolfo Vieira. We know that controversially, this fight was initially on the main event, on the main card, my apologies. That was over fights that were more deserving of that position. Very happy that the UFC listened and actually demoted that ranking. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, I think Nickel was also on 300, and they were putting him over crazy. Like they had him there at a higher position than Charles Oliveira, remember? And that was ridiculous as well. So I know the UFC keep trying to promote Bo Nickel, but they keep doing this weird rage bait, clickbait thing where they try to give him these completely undeserved ranking positions or these showing and fighting positions in the cards, and then the fans have to have full outrage, and now they adjust it afterwards and say, ha ha ha, yeah, we listen to the fans. Like, I find that very weird behavior, because on the other hand, when people criticize Bo Nickel for the strength of the competition he's going against, and for quote unquote the level of accomplishments he's had in MMA and the UFC versus the way how he speaks, and you see people say, well, we can't give him that much criticism as the fans because of what he wants, because he's still a new fighter, but still they're pushing him so much, it leaves really sour taste in the mouth. But rant over, to get back to the actual fighting aspect of it. Bo Nickel versus Rodolfo Vieira, I think Bo Nickel wins. Yeah, Bo Nickel's the one coming off the loss versus Rodolfo's win. And yeah, it was also Bo Nickel's first loss, but his loss was against Reiner de Ridder. And I know a lot of people are giving Reiner the Ritter a lot of flag because of how his last fight ended against Arnold Allen. However, I think it was warranted, even whether I agree or not, but I think it's understandable. Reiner the Ritter is still a former two-time, two-weight, two-division champion in ONE FC, the second biggest MMA organization. And he was still running through a lot of the UFC's participants, including former champion Robert Whitaker, even though that was a difficult fight, but still beat him concisively. Whereas Bo Nickel, yeah, he got finished by him. He got exposed, but Bo Nickel's still one of the best pure wrestlers in the UFC. He has a lot of power in his striking, as a lot of wrestlers tend to have. However, when it comes to the actual quality of the technical aspects of his striking, that's to be seen. He hasn't. He's been speaking a little bit less loud as he was before his loss. So I'm assuming he's been in the lab working for a bit. So I'm very curious to see his improvements. I just think that the wrestling pressure is going to be too much. I think his power shots are going to be a little bit too much for Rodolfo. I think that he just more or less wrestle fucks him and then knocks him out once he shows the openings. Wouldn't be surprised if Vieira's jiu-jitsu and submissions become available, and that becomes kind of either an equalizer or a differentiator. I know that for a lot of wrestlers, good jiu-jitsu tends to be the thing that actually smothers or at least delays the offensive, unless you're of the Dagestani, like Caucasus wrestler type, which tend to be a lot more top heavy and pressure heavy and better at adapting to that. But in general, I just believe that Bo Nickel kind of gets through this as another quote unquote performance against a can, as we've been saying for some time now. I think that Bo Nickel gets it done by finish, second or third round against Rodolfo Vieira. Now, moving on to the main card, we have Beneil Dariush versus Benoit Saint Denis. All of these fights are going to be fireworks. I'm looking forward to all of them. But to start off with Dariush versus BSD, I think Dariush wins. I think BSD is a great fighter. I think that especially in that battle against Ruffy, he really showcased um, that he still what at least has some semblance of what we expected him to be initially. And when we put him against Poirier, and even when you saw him go against Poirier, he was very aggressive in the opening rounds. However, his pure striking is lacking. If you're able to kind of delay, or you can at least offset some of that wrestling and aggression that he uses, because of how hard he comes out, he tends to tire out a bit, slow down, start revealing more gaps, or if you can beat him to the punch. We saw against Moicano, where Moicano was the one who took him down and had super aggressive top heavy ground and pound and just took him out of there with no issues, literally rearranged his face with no issues. I know that in those instances, we can see, end up seeing the changes and see a lot of the gaps exposed in BSD's game. But against pure strikers or people who don't hit as hard or people who can't land as cleanly, you can see him kind of just outmuscle them and forcefully beat them. But that fight style is very sloppy. Technical wise, it's very sloppy. It leaves a lot of openings, it's a lot of gaps, and that's why he had gotten knocked out by Poirier as well. He's using too much energy against higher level opponents who are more well-rounded, and they end up being able to stave off his takedowns for long enough to find the openings after he slows down. Dariush, in my opinion, is a terrible match for him. Dariush has very high level wrestling. I'm also not going to use the MMA math of, well, Moicano beat BSD and then Dariush beat Moicano. So obviously, Dariush beats BSD. I'm not going to do that. But we've said it multiple times, MMA math doesn't work. Or at least it doesn't work all the time. But Dariush, wrestling wise, very good wrestler. Dariush's wrestling defense And takedown defense should at the very least allow him to be capable of, if not staving off BSD's takedowns, at least responding, getting up, and being very aware. Not only that, when it comes to pure striking, while it may not be the prettiest, I think that Dariush is a better striker than Benoit Saint Denis. Dariush is more accurate. He's able to find the chin more. He's able to dig body shots better. I also think that Dariush has a better fight IQ than him. I think that Benoit Saint Denis is a lot more powerful, though. I think Benoit, if he lands cleanly, he will knock out Dariush. However, overall, I just see it being a long fight for him. In a 3-round fight, I see Dariush basically sealing the deal in the 3rd round. Once again, once Benoit has launched his offensive, got staved off enough, and then Dariush has kind of adapted, read the game plan, seen the gaps, and felt it in real time, I see him finishing Benoit Saint Denis in the 3rd round, getting him out of there. Moving on, we have number 4 ranked Leon Edwards versus number 9 ranked Carlos Prates. Carlos Prates, first member of the Fighting Nerds who suffered the loss, and also the first member, the member who's actually been rebuilding that growth back like he never left. Of all the Fighting Nerds and that hype train that was behind them, Prates is despite being the first one to lose, I'd argue that he had the closest loss because his fight ended with him almost managing to get a finish on Ian Gary, in a lot of people's opinions. So he probably was the one who lost the least stock in his defeat, and he immediately gained it back with his knockouts. He's going against another striker in Leon Edwards, who is very clean, very sharp striker. We saw Edwards be able to out-technical and outpoint people. We also know that Prates isn't going to use the Bilal Muhammad strategy of trying to just out-wrestle him. That's not his style. We also saw when he went against Ian Gary, how that wasn't something that he really incorporated. So me watching this matchup, I think Prates will be a little bit too much for Edwards right now. Edwards has been in a bit of a down spiral. Not quite sure how he's looking right now, honestly. He's been MIA for a bit in every outing that he's had. In his outing against Bilal, he got dominated. Bilal was the one who knocked him a peg down. He fought a wrestler right after that. So he fought another wrestler right after that. Like he kind of had like a 4-fight streak of just wrestlers between Usman, Colby, Bilal, and then Sean Brady. And he beat 2 of them with Usman and Colby. Then he lost the 2 of them in Bilal and Sean Brady, and he lost increasingly dominantly against another pure striker or another primary striker in Carlos Prates. Prates hits harder. Prates is more aggressive, but Prates is also a lot less technically sound than somebody like Ian Gary. Prates will be a lot less accurate with his punches, but he'd be a lot more aggressive with his onslaught. And Edwards is slow. Edwards takes too much time to think. Edwards tries to contemplate, sit back, strike, think about what you do. You put too much pressure on Edwards, he crumbles. That's always been his thing. Mentally, he's a little bit weak, if we're just going to be honest. So against a fighter like Prates, who aggression is the name of the game, I see Edwards having good moments. I actually expect Edwards to win that first round, do his thing, try to get his ring, try to understand him, but I just see Prates kind of overwhelming and breaking him. I think Prates gets him out of there in the 2nd or 3rd round. I think Prates hits him, Edwards feels the power, becomes a lot more timid, and then Prates finds him. Prates has a lot more weapons that he utilizes. While Edwards uses his strikes, his kicks to find the range and control distance, but Prates has his elbows, his knees, that good Muay Thai style, like Prates really coming in, pushing the aggression, pushing the physicality, physically like really getting on him. And then the way how that does mentally to your psyche, I don't see Edwards with all of his issues being capable of overcoming a lot of that. And I see him just succumbing and breaking to Prates. After that, we're not really sure what direction there's going to be for Edwards. However, for Prates, he'd find himself in the top 5, right back on track after losing to Ian Gary. And it would be interesting to see what some of those matchups look like afterwards. But for now, let's wait and see how this is going. But in my opinion, Carlos Prates, second or third round finish. Moving on, we have number 2 rank Sean Brady versus number 8 rank Michael Morales in the same division. This main card is a welterweight showcase. Sean Brady, the same person I just mentioned as one of the ones who would beat Leon Edwards, against outstanding upcomer Michael Morales. 2 fighters with 18 wins each, with Miles Morales being undefeated and Sean Brady's sole loss coming from former welterweight champion Belal Muhammad, another person who had defeated Leon Edwards. How do I see this fight going? I'm a bit conflicted with this one specifically. I'm a bit conflicted because I think it's equally possible to go either way. We have a high-level wrestler in Sean Brady versus a high-level striker in Michael Morales. Michael Morales is very fast, very aggressive, has all the same weapons that I just mentioned for Carlos Prates, but I would argue, as in the knees, elbows, kicks, but I would argue that Michael Morales is a cleaner striker than Prates is. I think Michael Morales is more technically sound in the aspect of able to find targets better, faster speed, more fight IQ. I think overall Michael Morales is just better, a better version of Carlos Prates in a lot of aspects. Whereas Sean Brady, with that wrestling, he also has very high level. He has good boxing, great high level wrestling, good timing, and then you really seen the adjustments that he's made in his loss after his loss to Belal Muhammad. Also has a genuine submission threat to him as well. But how do those pair against each other? I think it depends on who pushes the offensive and who can maintain their aggression first and better. I think both fighters are going to try to come forward as much as possible, even though I think that Michael Morales is going to be the more aggressive of the two. If Sean Brady can not just straight on wither that and just take that oncoming onslaught, but he can counter it and return with his own, change the tempo, change the angles. When Morales comes forward, tries to rush you, tries to knee, tries to push you over, get to the hip, get to the side, make it a wrestling match, immediately threaten submission, tire him out. Drag him into not even just deep waters, make him blow his fuse as early as possible, pause, and then get that submission. I think that Sean Brady can get this fight done. Michael Morales, on the other hand, if he can handle that wrestling threat, adjust into that properly, has good enough takedown defense to stop Sean Brady from really pushing forward and land some of those shots, I think he'll soften him up. I think he'll weaken him. I think he'll slow him down. In the moment that Sean Brady isn't fast enough or aware enough to encounter that oncoming pure aggression that's going to be heading his way, I think that's when Morales finds his shots, finds his knees, finds his elbows, blows him down, take him out, and get him out of there. I think it's really, I don't even think it's a 60-40. I think it's a 55-45. And by saying 55-45, there is still one fighter of the two that I believe that is still a little bit more likely to actually come out with a win, and that's Sean Brady. I think having that experience against somebody who did become a champion, like Belal Muhammad, and the former champion as well in Leon Edwards, 2 former champions, who, even though he lost against one, a striker and a grappler, 2 fighters who are also well-rounded themselves. Belal has decent boxing, and Edwards has decent wrestling, grappling, missions. They're both very different styles from Morales, But Bilal is a very pressure heavy fighter. And I think that Sean Brady really did that time in the gym. I think that Sean Brady will be able to adjust and adapt better to Morales' offensive. I think Sean Brady will be able to slow him down, find his timing, exhaust him, and get him out of here in the third or fourth round via submission. However, Morales is still every bit of a threat, and it is not unlikely or unrealistic to expect that Morales will run full force into Sean Brady and steamroll him before he can even knows what's hit him. Similar to what Alex Pereira did to Magomed Ankalaev in their rematch. I think this is going to be a very exciting and interesting fight to see. But my pick is Sean Brady by his submission in the third or fourth round. Moving on to the co-main event, a battle between two of the greatest female fighters in UFC and MMA history. Both of these women are easily in the UFC's and MMA's top 5 greatest female fighters of all time, without a doubt. Both fighters, I think, have a lot of similarities to each other, like even down to their records. 25-4-1 versus 26-3-0. Even down to their styles. Both are both are primarily strikers. Both women had issues in their respective past of initially dealing with grappling wrestlers for a bit, and they both made those adjustments to not only even incorporate it into their game, but all in as far as takedown defense, but even pushing the offensive and mixing it in fluently with their styles themselves. I think this is a phenomenal matchup and great for the women's MMA division in the UFC. I think that Zhang Weili moving up, relinquishing her title and her championship to challenge for Valentina's, really gives her an opportunity to compete with Amanda Nunes for the title of greatest female fighter of all time. Who do I believe wins this matchup, though? Well, let's look at their styles. Zhang Weili is a faster striker who is a lot more aggressive with that initial 1-2, whereas Valentina Shevchenko is a lot more counter puncher. Very strong punch, strong right, strong combination right hooks, and then she's also good at adjustment. And she's been pushing the wrestling in her style to open up those shots a lot more as well. In this fight, Zhang Weili is going to be the smaller fighter. Both of these fighters are no stranger to being the smaller one, and they aren't any stranger to getting the finish while being the smaller fighter. However, this is going to be a disadvantage for Zhang Weili. Shevchenko is already the better power puncher of the two. Shevchenko is also already a great counter puncher. Shevchenko, just like Weili herself, highly experienced fighter. Been in there with the best of the best, just like Zhang Weili, but she's actually been in there against somebody like Amanda Nunes in her prime. So we've also seen Weili in this previous fight against Suarez fully learn how to adapt and adjust. But we saw Shevchenko in this last fight against Madame Fierro, how Shevchenko is able to really adapt, adjust, slow the fight down, read what's going on, change the strategy slightly, tweak it just a little bit to make sure it still works. We've seen Weili and Shevchenko do phenomenal and amazing things when they were the underdogs, as they both were in their last two fights. I think Weili wins, though. I think Weili is faster than Shevchenko. I think Weili is better at throwing combinations and adapting. They're both strong for their weight class. I think that Weili's strength will be comparable, or at least good enough to at least present some challenge to Shevchenko. I think Shevchenko will still be stronger, but I don't think Weili will get bullied in the clinch. I don't think that Weili would really get overwhelmed by the wrestling, especially with some of the adjustments and adaptability we saw in her showing against Tatiana Suarez. I do think that Weili has to be careful, be very cognizant of Shevchenko's counter rights, be very cognizant of the leg kicks, of the wrestling threat, of the full well-roundedness. Whereas with Shevchenko, she has to be cognizant of the speed of Weili, of the aggression, of the ring generalship, and of her cutting off the cage and preventing her, not playing her game. And she can't try to do what she did with Fiora and try to wait too much, because Weili will outspeed Blitzer and then use that as an opportunity to set up a bigger threatening move. I think Weili is more capable of pushing her game plan than Shevchenko. If we were talking about percentages earlier, this is the fight where I'm more divided on. In this one, I'm 51% Weili, 49% to Shevchenko. I think it's that close. I think we legitimately are on to the greatest, possibly the greatest showing that we could see from the female MMA division, even with the history of Nunes, Shevchenko, all of these great female fighters we've seen in the past. I think this is the one that we really are on the road to see something great. My vote is for Zhang Weili by decision. With these 5 rounds, I wouldn't be surprised if a finish for either fighter came along the way, as that's something they're both capable of doing. But with how high level this fight is and how well matched they are against each other, I say Zhang Weili by decision at the end. Say 49-48. Wouldn't be surprised if it's split. Looking forward to this one. Moving on to the main event. We have the champion Della Maddalena versus the former lightweight champion Islam Makhachev. How do we see this one going? This fight, great potential. Both fighters have been undefeated for their entire well, Islam had 1 loss. But after that 1 loss, they've both been on these incredibly long UFC win streaks. Both fighters have been looking incredible. What are their advantages? Jack Maddalena, I think that the fight, another fight where I think that not only the fighters themselves pair well against each other, but their previous fights prepared them for each other. Jack Maddalena is undoubtedly, with the sole exception of possibly Ilia Topuria, the best boxer in the UFC right now. It is between him and Ilia as the top 2 best boxers, as well as how they implement it. And it's very arguably that Jack Maddalena is the better boxer. Islam Makhachev, one of the best overall grapplers in the UFC right now, arguably the best grappler in the UFC. And that's with consideration to people like Charles Oliveira, Hamza Chimaev, as well, even Bilal Muhammad himself. With consideration to all of these people, it still most likely is Islam. Jack Maddalena's last fight was against Bilal, a very pressure-heavy wrestler who pushes the offensive and tries to mix it up. Bilal didn't initiate his wrestling offensive initially as much as he usually does. And when he did pick it up and was more consistent with it, it did give JDM a bit more trouble. But we still saw JDM get it done and adapt and overcome that. Islam Makhachev went against Poirier. Poirier looked better than he's ever looked before or since. Poirier pushed the boxing, did his research, had experience against Khabib, ensured that he was very prepared for the grappling and wrestling attempts. Mixed in everything and still got done perfectly, was always in the fight, and Islam still overcame that, got it done, was the one who was winning the majority of the boxing exchanges. And we always considered Poirier one of the best boxers in the UFC. Doesn't matter if people think it was because of the wrestling threat that he got it done. He still got it done. No matter what you say or think, he still got it done. So the question now becomes, how is it that they're going to do that against each other? I do think I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that Islam overall had an easier time with Dustin Poirier than Jack Della Maddalena had against Bilal Muhammad. I understand it's because there are 2 different types of opponents, but still, JDM was landing the cleaner boxing exchanges, landing more combinations, bigger strikes, more accurate. Despite Bilal trying to push out the more output and attempting to land more, JDM, incredible head movement, incredible game plan for stifling the wrestling for the most part, and then the landing afterwards. However, between rounds 3 to 5, when Bilal started actually using more wrestling and pushing the offensive more, we saw that it started giving JDM more problems. We saw in the 4th and 5th rounds, Bilal using the fence more, getting JDM more. Even when JDM defended, Bilal chain wrestled, reversed it, got him in these positions. And Bilal's takedown attempts are a lot simpler than Islam's. Bilal tends to go high crotch, low single, and sometimes he'll do it with a shoulder throw. He'll occasionally he'll do a lat drop, reverse position. More or less, Bilal's takedowns can be summarized as those 3 to 4 takedown attempts. Islam, a lot more creative. He can do the arm drag, leg throw, judo throw. He's a lot more creative. He can do traditional takedowns. Very good at fence wrestling. Good at pressuring. Size-wise, both of them are capable of using their strength to make their plan more emphasized. Islam is going to be the smaller fighter, but he's been said to be very strong, and he's been taking time to build his strength. I don't think that he's going to be stronger than JDM, but I do think that he's going to be capable of at least offsetting JDM. When I look at it from that lens, I don't see him as him not going to be able to at least do what he did against Volkanovski. The reason why I pointed out that JDM had a harder time against Muhammad than Islam did against Poirier is the difference in just their 1st and 5th rounds. Specifically, their 1st and 5th rounds. The 1st round against Dustin Poirier, Islam Makhachev took him down instantly, and they spent that entire round in a submission attempt position. Whereas, and in that 5th round, Islam kept pushing the offensive, managed to take him down in the open and find that submission after being tired and exhausted. Whereas JDM in that 1st round, he was expecting Muhammad to push the takedown and the threat a lot more. Bilal made a single takedown attempt near the end of the round. JDM, despite being cautious, still was getting stuff done. And then by the end of that 5th round, where JDM almost finished Muhammad, however, in those wrestling exchanges, Muhammad still got him with the lat drop, still was able to fight for those positions. And despite JDM defending really well, he was still getting caught by the constant wrestling onslaught by a tired Bilal Muhammad who was dazed by getting tagged up by JDM in that round and was having difficulties breathing. In that aspect, I think it would be fair to say that, and that especially when you talk about the positions where Bilal did have JDM on the ground in the 4th round, for example, where Bilal is being top heavy, but JDM is able to sneak out the back and really try to get right back to a game plan, similar to what we saw him do to Gilbert Burns, constantly moving, get out the takedown, and manage to land those attacks. But with Islam is a lot more top heavy. Islam is a lot more submission heavy. If Islam gets to some of those positions Bilal was in, Islam is putting out a lot of submission attempts, being very much more controlled with his body weight, which is something that JDM is not encountered, and something that Bilal does not do. So, but at the same time, JDM throws better combinations than Poirier. A lot more aggressive. He's a lot less telegraphed. He's a lot more defensively sound with his height, with being able to adjust his hands. JDM tends to keep his hands right here, where he can switch to a high guard or drop them low to counter a takedown attempt. So I do think Islam is going to suffer a lot with getting to those takedowns with how prepared and decided he gets. What do I think? I think Islam gets it done. Personally, very high level fight. JDM is very capable of knocking him out. JDM is a very great fighter. very well rounded and going to be very prepared for this fight. But I think Islam finds it. I think Islam finds a submission. Islam is very defensively sound with his striking. Islam tends to try to disengage a lot, whereas JDM tends to chase him more. I think that in this specific matchup, Islam has done his research. I think Islam is every bit capable of getting him out of there the moment he gets to those submissions. I think Islam will push that wrestling offensive far more than Bilal did. And if Bilal was able to find it in the moments where he was more tired and less consistent with the wrestling offensive, I think Islam's capable of as well. And I think that while he may not get it the very first time or the second time, but I think that Islam will get it eventually. I think that he gets JDM out of there via submission. Wouldn't even be surprised if he's losing the fight up to that point. But I do think Islam gets it done via submission. I say fourth or fifth round. But there you have it, guys. Tell me, what your thoughts, what y'all think about my prediction. I know this is a bit longer video, but this is a massive card. This is one of those ones. I'll probably do individual video breakdowns about the main, co-main, yeah, maybe even the feature main event as well. But look forward to it. We're definitely excited for this one. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.